we put together a couple of slides just to, with some of the, I mean, we basically explained in the email, and hopefully that wasn't too confusing or complicated, but do you have the
Yeah.
slides, Kanchan? Okay. Yeah, so basically we just thought that story sharing would be a nice way to kind of get at some of the more ephemeral qualities that we'd love to focus on through the design process, and just hear from you all so we can learn and listen more as we go along with understanding the project and the Bradford Springs site in particular. So we thought that we'd start with a few icebreakers, of which everyone is welcome to choose. I think we have 3, yeah. Just choose one or multiple of these, and then we can just kind of go into more general, whatever comes to mind that anyone wants to share. But yeah, these were the 3, and we can start. Kanchan, do you have anything right away, or?
Yeah, I guess I'll just add in though, Polly. Yeah, I hope this doesn't seem too weird to you guys to be trying to do this through storytelling. Our thought, I guess, was just that sometimes asking like really direct questions, it's harder to get actually at like what the meaning is behind experiences of places. So yeah, that was, I guess, just to like even just reiterate that. But yeah, to start, actually, speaking of like how hot it is and dry it is here, this isn't a forest smell, but outside, so I live like up in the mountains, actually outside of LA, and there's a creek that runs through the property I live on. And right now it's totally dry. It's been like bone dry for months. But with the last few weeks, with it being so hot, like I'll walk out there and there's just this super sweet smell that fills like the whole creek bed from the plants. There's like a lot of different like chaparral scrub stuff that gets this really beautiful aromatic smell. And it's just like this feeling of like everything's still alive, even though it looks like so dried out and brown and like haggard. But the like walking through that and like smelling that like sweet, warm smell like reminds me that it's, you know, to come back as soon as the rains come. So it's something I've really been loving the last few weeks.
Yeah, that's great. I will, let's see. I will maybe share a vivid water memory I have is learning to swim. And I grew up in Central Mass. So just like in a very small town, pine forest, kind of up on a hill. And when I was a kid, we would swim in this little pond. It used to be an old mill pond. So there was a little dam there and a bridge that we'd jump off into the pond. But a friend taught me to dive when I was, I don't know, still pretty young. And I just have this incredibly strong memory of diving off into this pond and feeling like I had done it for the first time. And then coming up out of the water and a little water snake raising its head up and just looking right at me and realizing sort of that I had like scared the snake just as much as the snake had startled me. And I feel like it was just this strong moment of awareness around that small little pond is this shared resource between me, this big human, and like all these other little water snakes. And we'd see turtles there and frogs, and it's like all the other creatures living there. Yeah, so.
Well, my water story would be I've almost drowned twice.
Wow.
Once when I was a little kid, I had been taking swimming lessons all summer long and done really, really, really well. I was really confident. And they handed out all the awards. And they got me mixed up with another kid that had hardly ever been there. So when they handed out all the awards, we all were supposed to dive into the water from the wharf, what do you want to call it? And because they told me I couldn't swim because I didn't get any awards, I didn't try to swim. They had to reach in and pull me out of the water. And my mother asked me, "What are you, stupid or something? Move your hands and feet." I go, "They told me I can't swim." So, and then another time as a teenager, I was at Clough Pond, Joe Sylvia, which is where the Indian chimney is supposed to be. And some of my friends were out in the middle of the lake, and I'm thinking, oh, they must be standing on a rock or something, because they've been out there for quite a while. So I swim out there with another friend of mine. We get all the way out to the girls, and I go, "What are you guys standing on?" They go, "We're not, we're treading water." I go, "Oh, crap. This isn't going to be good." So I turned around and started swimming back to shore. And I was a police explorer at the time. And there were some people sitting on the embankment of the lake, and I recognized them as not good people. And I said, "Help." And the girl says, "What's the matter, pig? You gonna die?" I'm like, "Oh no." And I could have stood up, but I didn't realize that I was exhausted. And back then I was in really good shape, so I don't know why I was exhausted, but got up to my truck and hung on, and the whole truck started shaking. And my friends came in, and they realized what happened. So they said, "Well, why don't we go home and get changed, and we'll meet you down at the Weeks restaurant in town," which is now Dimitri's. So I was okay. We went home, changed, met them at the restaurant. I took a drink of Coca-Cola, and started choking, and had the whole sensation all over again. So I'm really careful around the water now. I should be called Walkie, because even though I'm rather buoyant looking, I don't float too well. So that's my story about the water.
Wow. Well, it's good to have you here and that you came through both of those experiences. It's a big deal.
Yeah, I'll go next. So I've been caught in the rain unprepared many times. It just happens. If you spend enough time outside, you're eventually be caught out in the rain. But one of the most memorable one was we were on vacation up in Maine on Chimo Pond, where my wife's family is from. And it was beautiful. It was middle of August. It's a beautiful sunny day, and we decided to take the canoe out on the pond and go for a ride. And we paddled all the way across the other end of the pond because there's a little like public recreation center, and they have ice cream and drinks and that stuff. So we were going there, and when we got there, everyone was packing up and leaving because apparently there was they just got notification that there was a rainstorm coming. It's like, okay, we'll just jump in the canoe and head back. Like, it's a small pond. It's not huge. It's, ponds in Maine are different than ponds anywhere else. They're a lot bigger. Ponds in Maine are like lakes everywhere else. We didn't get maybe a quarter of the way, and the wind and rain and thunder and lightning was so hard. I was doing everything I could to keep our canoe going straight. The waves I've been caught in the ocean as well in a canoe, so it's not fun. But this pond was blowing so hard, the wind was blowing so strong, we eventually had to paddle over to the side, almost capsized because of course the water is coming in sideways to the shore, but that's where we need to head. And I had to carry my son and the canoe a good 2 miles down the shoreline in this pouring rainstorm. It's something I'll never forget. It's a reminder of how strong nature in itself can be, but water in particularly can be, no matter how calming and soothing it appears. It's very powerful.
Yeah. How old was your son when you were carrying?
He was 6.
Okay, so it's quite a load with the canoe.
Yeah. It wasn't exactly easy.
Wow.
So my vivid memory of being in the water, and I've been sitting here trying to think of like a more positive story, but my fellow tribal members both didn't either. So here we go. When Caleb, our grandson, was little, I want to say he was like 5, or I would say 5. We took him camping up along the Kangamangas, and We didn't have reservations or anything, and everything was full. But luckily we pulled down into this one campground and they had held back a few sites just in case they made a mistake on their reservation thing. And it was that time of the night where they were releasing those sites and we lucked out and got one. So we were setting up the tent and Caleb really wanted to go for a swim. And the woman had told me in the office that so there was a natural rock water slide in the river at this campground. And she asked me how old my grandson was, and I told her, and she said, oh yeah, the kids go down the slide. He should be old enough. So we got the tent almost set up, and I got to say, Bill has always hated camping because he works in the woods. So to him, it's not a vacation. It's like, why would you want to sleep in the woods when you work there all day? But I love camping. So the camp was almost set up, and he was really looking forward to go out to eat. That's what he likes about camping, is eating in the restaurants. And I said, well, let me take Caleb down so he can go on the water slide really quick, because I know we're going to want to pack up early in the morning and get out of here. So off we go, and there were these kids, and one of them had his arm in a cast, and the kids are sliding down, and then they're catching each other and grabbing them out. So I didn't have a bathing suit on, Caleb did, and I had a camera. I was going to take his picture, and the kids said, oh yeah, we'll catch him. And then beyond this point where they would grab hold and pull him out of the rushing water, it was a big drop off into a deep pool. So I'm there, I got the camera, I have a little silk blouse on and these shorts, and the kid gets a hold of Caleb's arm, but it's the kid with the cast, and it's the broken arm he's holding onto Caleb with, and he's like, I'm losing him. Oh my God. And he lets go of my grandson. And Caleb might have even been 4, but I don't think so. I think he was 5. Anyway, I get a hold of Caleb, but I can't pull him out. And instead I go with him. And so we go off the end, and I'm just like thinking, what am I, your mind is racing. How am I going to handle this? What am I going to do? And under we both go. And my feet are not touching ground or not touching ground or not touching ground. And I was like, we're going to both drown. I thought about letting him go and then get my breath and then go out. No, my God, I'll lose. Oh, it was horrible. It was just a horrible moment. But finally, my feet hit the ground. I popped back up, got our heads above water. And he thought it was great fun, of course. He's holding on to me like, yay, Grammy. And I'm just thinking, God, if we live. So we get over to the side. There's a big rock. We get over out of the stream of water flowing off to the side. There's this big rock. I'm clinging to the rock as best I can. And there were a bunch of people up, mostly men, drinking. And I have a silk blouse on with nothing else under it. And I'm soaking wet. And I'm just like, I do not want to call these guys to come help me. I got to call these guys to come help me. Finally, one of the guys said, do you need help? I go, yeah, because the water, there was still current pushing against me. I was afraid it was going to knock us back into the stream. Anyway, I came out, just kept smiling and tried to maintain my dignity. We get over to Bill pulls up, we get to the car, we go to get in, and he's grumbling like, what took you so long? Yeah, I wasn't happy with poor Bill. Anyway, that's our story. We live to tell about it. My daughter has never let me forgotten the time I almost drowned my grandson.
Wow. Just the adrenaline in those moments, I feel like, is so.
It is, and actually, it was a faith moment too, because it was like, okay, I hope we don't both die, but here we go. I'm not letting go of him, and then getting up, and then at the rock, and then you're thankful. You think, yay, how did we make it through? Now the water's pushing at you, and you're thinking, okay, it's not over yet. But yeah, we got through it. So I don't know how that helps with the design, those stories, but.
Yeah, we want positivity.
No, I mean, I think that it's just hard to be remote and not be able to get to interact more than we are and get to know you and get a sense of the project that way. So I feel like even even the things that don't feel relevant are actually. So
And the
Yeah.
theme of that water is powerful. I think that's a good one because it is.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I've had scary moments myself in rivers and the ocean. And
Same. Yeah, my dad, because I grew up on the Cape, and my dad's one of his favorite pastimes was to force us out on little sailboats during nor'easters. And there was like, I mean, every time it was insane, but the most crazy one, my sister was probably like 8, and maybe I was 11. And the winds were so strong that we kept like catapulting. And one point, my sister got like thrown from the boat and like probably 20 feet. You know, we had to go swim and get her and like pull her back on. But yeah, it is. It's amazing. Like it's that to feel that fear is like so intense.
Yeah.
And I think you would really relate to water differently after feeling that kind of fear in the water.
yeah.
Well, and then yeah, just to pull up this slide to kind of transition into some of the things we mentioned. I mean, and this was just our way of trying to get at stories that might be related to the springs or indirectly or directly. But really, like anything that comes to mind or that you want to share. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Daryl.
Chief Don just
Ah,
came in.
hi, Dawn.
Hey, Chief.
Sometimes it takes a minute.
Yeah.
Hello. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? Quay?
So, Dawn, this is Polly and Hanshin, and they're doing our design work for the Bradford Springs and kind of helping us with other aspects in the project.
Great.
They just asked us about missing stories, and the rest of us shared vivid memories of being in the water. I don't know if you have any vivid memories of being in the water that you want to share.
I mean, being in the water, I mean, we lived in the water as kids. I mean, that's all we did, right? We were in the water all the time. Mostly some of it for fun, some of it after we got so much hay shaft down our shorts, we had to get the hay out of it because everybody's been there, done that, right? But I mean, memorable stuff is like visiting Brunswick Springs and getting the healing waters out of that sacred place. And there's been many burials up there. Many, there's a lot of things happening around the springs. And my assumption is that the Bradford Springs are similar, and we had them strategically all over the place, that we visited. So if someone's really sick, it's hard to travel way up north to get some of the healing springs. And in most of our history anyway, where you find the ceremonial sites or cairns, they're located either where a spring comes out of the earth, because obviously water is life and the web of life, and that's the nurturing. It's almost like breast milk from our mother. So many sacred sites would be near a spring coming out of the water. Water coming out of the ground. I mean, as a spring, and people would be located and do ceremonials. We find cairns around places that are like 4 feet wide by 6 feet long that would have ceremonial stone structures just to do those things. A lot of times they're on a mountain as well when the sun rose. So, I mean, that's kind of the things. Water has always been important to us.
Well, thank you so much, because the three of us could only tell these death-defying horror stories. So that we didn't tell you that, so you can just tell a good story. Thank you.
What is the springs you mentioned? Where is it? And
Are you talking about? You mean talking about Brunswick?
Yeah.
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Brunswick.
Brun-
Okay.
if you look up Brunswick Springs, the eighth wonder of the world, you kind of get an idea because it's sort of like what happened in Bradford. It was that there was a healing spring that our Nullhegan people ancestors watched over, and it had different minerals, just like Bradford had. And native people would come from all over the Northeast to drink the water so they could be healed. During the war, there was a white European soldier that was wounded, so they took him to the springs and put him into the springs, and he was healed. After that, he wanted to purchase or use the property, and our ancestors who lived there said, "As yes, you could, as long as you didn't make a profit. You didn't make a profit off from selling the water, right? Because the water is not ours to sell. It's given to us by the Creator and Mother Earth, and people are beyond us because it was here before we were." Long story short, her son was killed by one of the Europeans. So she cursed the spring, saying if anybody tries to make money off from it, that they would meet the same fate as her son. Because, he tried to stop someone who was using it for monetary value. So people would still come, but then they built a hotel. And they call it the eighth wonder of the world. People came from Europe and all over the place. And they pumped it into the hotel so people could bathe in it and it would heal them. And everything was going along fine until they decided to try to bottle the water and sell it. Because then they tried to make money off from the actual water itself, not because the other was making it off the hotel. And it burnt down. So they tried to rebuild it. It burnt down a second time. And before they were able to rebuild the third time, it burnt a third time. And after that, the partner who owned it with the brothers, one brother died. So the other brother got so scared of that, he turned it back over to the native people. So it's in trust now, for native people forever. And Missisquoi kind of manages that, but it's for all native people. So you could, like I said, if you look up the curse of Brunswick Springs, you'll kind of get the whole European picture of what happened. And to us, we have a thing called Spirit of the Woods or Big Hairy Man. And some people may call him Sasquatch or Bigfoot or whatever, but we call him the Spirit of the Woods, and he's the one that watches over that place and protects the land and animals. And Nullhegan's the only tribe that has a song dedicated to the Spirit of the Woods, who watches over those places. So that's kind of the backstory. And Bradford is almost mimics Brunswick Springs. It's almost a carbon copy of it, except it's in New Hampshire.
Wow, yeah, that's incredible to know about.
Yeah, like I said, if you obviously don't believe that we have a lot of hate bloggers out there too. So if you do search Curse of Brunswick Springs, there's I just tell Sherry Salmon's one of them that has kind of got it all over his site too. It's kind of a feed into his blog. So I just figured I'd let you guys know that he's a known Abenaki hater.
Oh, the reinvention of Vermont and New Hampshire Abenaki. And if you do that, if you want to waste your time on ugly hate speech, go for it, or maybe run as fast as you can.
But it is all over the place. We have brochures from the actual springs itself, copies of them, the stories about it. Yeah, it was pretty prevalent. I think it was, I don't know when that was, Sherry. Do you remember? Was that it was the 1800s, I think late 1800s, if not early 1900s, that over a span of time that they tried to develop this thing.
I think, and Saratoga had one too.
Yeah,
And
Saratoga Springs, yeah.
Yep, I think they all were about the same time. The one in Bradford first started in 1840, a little earlier, but it was settled maybe a little earlier down here, and ended about 1920.
As I say, Brunswick has arsenic and sulfur and a whole bunch of things, but I personally think that where they healed this gentleman was right where it meets the Connecticut, where it flowed into the Connecticut. Because if you've ever been to Brunswick Springs, it's quite a hill that the springs comes from. There's a pond, and then there's a spring, and then it goes over the side of the hill all the way down until it hits the Connecticut. And they wouldn't have dragged somebody wounded all the way up the hill. They would have put him where it met the Connecticut, because they would have canoed him up through the Connecticut, and it would have been somewhere there. So it would have had time to mix all of these minerals together. I mean, it got so famous that people actually put pipes in the ground for each one of the springs. There were seven different types of minerals that came out, and they had a pipe for each one of those areas. So each pipe would come out, and people would bring their cup and go underneath each one of those and drink it. I mean, a lot of that's been destroyed now, or separated, because that was from the old hotel that was there. There's nothing but a foundation there now. But anyway, you don't want to hear about Brunswick Springs, but I'm just saying there's precedent for Bradford Springs. It just, maybe Brunswick was documented a little more, because people still go there today and offer and leave offerings and.
Yeah, it had a long history.
Oh, there's Brian.
Yeah, hey, yeah, I'm here. I'm just hiding in the background. Yeah, it began in like the 1740s was, the story that Don first told, and then I think the last hotel burnt, I want to say in the 1930s. So it's almost a 200-year period where all that happened over and over again. But I was going to bring up the Kichiawas, the big hairy man that Don spoke about, because I was going to ask Don his thoughts, because I know we have our thoughts and pertaining, basically because it pertains to Brunswick Springs, but I didn't know if you knew or anybody knew any stories pertaining to him surrounding Bradford Springs or the Bradford Springs area. If there's, local New Hampshire sightings, I didn't know if there was any tie in there, because my thought from a spiritual, for lack of a better word, standpoint would be that there would be protection there as well, but I wasn't sure.
Well, my view is that the spirit of the woods, or the big hairy man, however we want to call him, is that because it was in the woods. I mean, it wasn't developed when we used it, right? I mean, it was a very important sacred site, so that spirit would be there to help protect those very important sites, and still do, in a manner of speaking, right? So they're still there. I think though that Brunswick is a little less populated. It's pretty rural, so there's still a lot of wild still there. I don't know about Bradford or about the other places, but it's like anything else. You can have a deer 2 feet from the road and you never see him, right? And to us, the spirit of the woods is a spirit. It manifests itself, but you can't catch it, right? It's sort of like Champ, Gitzigog, or the Great Serpent, or Bigfoot, Yeti, whatever you want to call them, is that they are a spirit who can manifest themselves so you can see them, but you're not going to catch them. And I love it when people come and they say, well, that's really a nice story. That's a nice folklore. I said, well, didn't Jesus manifest himself to the disciples? Wasn't there didn't people manifest themselves to some of the early Catholicism? So it's not that far-fetched. It's our belief system, and it's no different than other belief systems where they have people that would manifest and would allow you to see them, but you're not going to throw a sheet over them, or you're not going to throw a net over them and catch them.
So I've never heard of any stories about being like that in this area. the little people I'm aware of, and I've actually gotten glimpses out of the corner of my eye when I walk my own woods, but they're not so much protecting as they are mischieving.
Better bring some tobacco and little pennies or shiny things.
And then on our land, the protection, when we did our language camp every year, a blue heron, which is Gasco, right, would come and land in the pond, and she would hang around all week long, and we never had any rain. It could be horrific thunderstorms 4 miles south of us or 4 miles north of us, nothing at the house. It was like she held the weather back all week. And the one year, I think it was the first year, it was so powerful because the week ended, people got all packed up, just the last people were leaving, and she flew off, and right behind her, these horrible storm clouds came in and just drenched the whole area. So definitely, I've had that sense of protection here, but not, I'm not aware of any stories ever of it being like a mythical creature. But as you say, our spirit protectors can manifest in any form.
I don't know if Brian remembers, but were you at Nancy Millett's funeral, Brian?
No, I didn't make it.
Because we were there and a heron had landed and flew over. As soon as the ceremony ended, the heron flew over the grave and took off. And that was kind of their spirit bird that they used a little bit, was the heron. It's a medicine bird. We use it more for patient. We use heron wings for patient. Like somebody has anxiety or whatever. We use those in our ceremonies because you've never seen a more patient bird than a heron that could sit there for hours and just wait. So we use it for people with anxiety and other things in our ceremonies. We have owls for certain things. We have eagle feathers. There's a lot of different things, but that's not what you want to know about. I'm just saying is that there are many water birds, and water are very, very important for our people. You should check, Brian, about Saratoga and see if there's been any things like that there.
Yeah, I'll have to look. Not sure. I did just because I got my computer right here. I'm on my work computer. There were supposedly some sightings in Bradford, by the way.
Oh,
Cool. There you go.
There's just read an article. There's some team from California that came to New Hampshire and did like some research in the Bradford Deering area. So
Cool.
just interesting that it kind of ties in.
cool. Yeah, that is
Yeah.
very
I think it's wonderful to hear about the animals and waterfowl, and we're really interested in the plants there too, of course. Brian, we actually came across something that you wrote about all the ethnobotany of the Abenaki in the Northeast,
Yep.
which that's a really amazing document that you put together.
Oh, thank you.
Ryan, I had a question. I don't know if you know this or not, but do you have Atlantic white cedar in that document?
Offhand, I don't know, but like I said, I'm on my computer so I can look. Let's see.
Cool, because that's what is in Bradford Bog. It's unusual for it to be so far inland, and this is like, I think, the northernmost known stand of it. So it's really, really a big important part of why it's so protected there. But I did look up the medicine of it. It's a cypress tree, not really a cedar tree, and it's a different species. And there are some medicinal values. So I wanted to, if you don't have it in there, I was going to give those to you to add.
Yep. Yeah, I do have it in there. It's on the northern white cedar. If you have
Cool.
the document. If not, I can send it to you guys.
I have it.
Okay.
Not handy, but
Yep.
okay, good.
But
Thank
you do know that cedar is a woman's medicine, right? that falls along with the water that's inside the womb of the mother that carries life, but also Mother Earth. So, it makes sense that there would be cedar there.
Yeah.
That's why we used to carry women used to carry their things in cedar boxes. And that's, the Europeans saw that, and that's why they decided to make cedar chests. Because what do they put in there? Everything important to a woman. Their dress, their wedding dresses, their dishes. I mean, cedar is a woman's medicine.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. I mean,
I was going to share real quick too, Don, that you were talking about isolated areas. Remember that within a half mile of the springs is where Epstein's madam could afford to hide anywhere around the world. And they did all this research, and there were no planes flying over the spot. It was just really, really remote. And that's why she bought that place and hid out there. Yeah, it's really remote.
I have a separate question. So, what are we actually? I know you said you're helping us design stuff. So, what are you thinking of designing a special boardwalk that goes to the spring itself, or just an observatory platform, or what is the plans? And are you trying to incorporate what we're telling you into a design, or more informational panels? I mean, what could I just ask what are you trying to do?
Yeah, of course. So far, we've been doing just background research and trying to learn more. And I was able to go around to all the different sites so far in the project with Sherry, who took a big chunk of her day to kind of show me all the different sites. And so we're really just kind of moving into design now, and really we want to respond to what the needs and desires of the project are. And so we don't really have a set agenda. It's more just about what you all want and feel like would be best to sort of communicate the project and what's important to you at the site. And so if that's a boardwalk leading out to an observation platform, it can absolutely be that. And I guess in terms of the conversation now, we thought of it more as just an informal way of sort of getting a little bit at some of the qualities, I guess, that are harder to articulate, just for our understanding. And I don't know, Kanchan, if you want to jump in at all.
Yeah, sorry, my internet dropped just there. But yeah, I mean, the hope is that those questions we answer together, and because definitely like the questions about, you know, how close does the boardwalk get to the springs? What shape is it? What's the form? What's the path? All of those we see as like really important, that they you know, need to come from the way that, you know, tribal members, I guess the general public also going to the site, like the way you hope that to be able to interact with the place. And so I guess part of this conversation we wanted to have to start to get a better sense of like, you know, are there ceremonies or events or gatherings that you hope will happen there? Are there certain like forms or paths or orientations that might be important? I mean, we obviously know none of that. Yeah, like just want to make sure that, you know, all of that comes from conversation, and then we can kind of find different ways of incorporating those things into the design, or like make the design speak to that.
So the property next door to the springs, John, there is currently a boardwalk. It's kind of two boards side by side that travel along a path through the cedar forest. And when you get out quite a ways, kind of beyond the forest, and it opens up into the bog, there's a observation deck, and there's a little tower, like you go up a set of stairs, and there's a higher platform so you can look out over the bog. So that's what currently exists next door. Here, there's nothing. There's the empty cellar holes. There's, you pull in, there's a little circular driveway, and then you can, people are driving now. We kind of want to, they want to stop it, and I would agree. But there's an area that is sort of grassy and shaded. And there's a picnic table there. That's where we could set up easy ups. And they've, everybody's agreed with building, if at any point we decided to build like a, what do you call it? Pavilion type thing that we could not have to use Easy Ups if we want to do craft demonstrations or sell arts there. And then there's a little break in a stone wall, and you walk through that. There's a few more cellar holes. It's still wooded. Then it opens up into the swamp, the bog, and it's dry right now, but normally it's wet. And it's quite a walk, huh, Polly, to get out to the springs, which is just a well in the middle of the area now. And you saw the pictures, Dawn. Some of the bricks are broken out and the top cement's cockeyed, and there's still some metal there from the old pump. So, yeah, it's just a big question of what we want to do with it. So we just sort of initially have thought about a boardwalk going out to an observation deck. I've been a little leery of having people be able to go right to the springs. I think we've talked about, there's a little stream between the shore. It's almost to the springs. There's a little stream that goes through. And so we looked at stopping before you get to the stream to kind of discourage people from getting off the observation deck and walking over to the springs. So that's kind of as far as we've gone. I always thought of the observation deck as round. And
How about a replica of the spring house?
yeah, originally there was,
Observation deck.
I'll have the observation deck be, so when they built the hotel, they did an octagonal spring house over the spring. And then that was the only building left. And in the 1970s, a guy bought it and they moved it to another farm nearby. So it's been renovated. Bill is fascinated by that building. And in the easement, they talked about perhaps rebuilding that. So Bradford Historic Conservation Commission had talked about, they reserved the right to rebuild the spring house, which really excited Bill. I personally would rather see the wellhead gone and no spring house, have it look more natural the way it would have. But at any rate, even Anne from the Conservation Commission she's like, oh, really? That's in there? Like, it doesn't sound like there are any plans from the town to rebuild that octagonal spring house. But Bill's suggesting, should we have the platform be octagonal, kind of a replica of the spring house? That would make Bill happy.
Well, my question would be is why wouldn't we want to go to the wellhead to make it easier to get the water, I guess?
I think originally I was thinking more in terms, this is a thing where I sort of just thought we were going to just, I don't know, it's growing a lot more than I originally envisioned it. So now we're talking about getting the water tested, making sure it's safe. We may want to do that. So one of the thoughts I had was, well, we could have an observation deck for now. There's been a lot, as you heard the commission members talk about, there's been a lot of theft. I mean, it's really isolated. There's nothing watching out for this place. So like the Historical Society had created a brass plaque and mounted it on a rock, and somebody stole the brass plaque off the rock. They've stolen the granite posts that were either side of the opening in the stone wall. They've stolen the signs off the trees. So they had to put the signs up like 20 feet high on the trees. So my initial thoughts, and Anne is very worried about that whatever we do, vandals are going to harm it. So I was thinking, like, if we're not going to shore up that well, that to keep people from going and stealing the bricks off it and all that kind of stuff. But now we're really talking more about doing a lot more. We have a lot more support and we have resources coming in. So I think eventually, John, we may well do that.
Well, I think for me, there's a plan A and a plan B, or a phase 1 and a phase 2 in my mind. If vandals are going to destroy any kind of work that's done to the well, then it doesn't make sense to put something to the well because they'll just destroy it, unless there's a way to protect it. But if it fills with water and we can't get to it, then it cuts off our access to the well, which is not also good. So maybe plan A is the pavilion and doing some education around that. And then plan B, as funds come available, is maybe make a small boardwalk that goes out to the springs where it comes to a platform where someone could get water, and make it big enough where they could turn around. Because part of walking across the open area, you also get to view the springs, you get to view the bog, you get to, because I've seen a lot of places, especially if it's dry, they sink in some 4x4 or some cedar posts, and make a walkway, big enough for, I don't know, enough for people to walk out and turn around and come back, or bypass each other. Kind of, then you can have information around that wellhead.
Yeah.
But that would only be if it's gonna, you don't want to put all kinds of money and effort into something and all of a sudden people just destroy it or use it as a site to go out and, be stupid, right? Like hurt the bog or hurt the wetland. We don't want that. So
Right.
I guess it has to be based on respect,
Right.
right? And I think whatever, I mean, because if the pavilion's going to be close, they're going to damage that first, or they're going to mess with that first, or tag, spray paint it, tag it, destroy it. I mean, we would hope that if it's labeled native, some people may respect it, but there's no guarantee by the sounds that they would.
I honestly think that most of the damage is happening from teenagers, young kids that are bored. And there was a rash of thefts in Bradford a few years back, and it was young people acting out. So I do think with a lot of education around what it's about, it'll be interesting to see. I honestly don't think it's going to be an issue. And there are other people in town that don't think it's going to be an issue. Anne, who lives right across the street, she feels like it could be an issue and we should be aware of it.
As I say, we can always do a ceremony to curse anybody who destroys
Right.
anything.
Uh,
And it'll be the curse of Bradford Springs instead of Brunswick. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and we'll publicize that. We'll get a lot of media.
Just,
So I would love to see us go right to the springs. I haven't talked to the Historical Society about the idea of removing that brick well. That's what I'd like to do. But
I was just going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the wellhead removed, more natural setting.
yeah, and maybe there's another alternative too, is that if there is a spring that you could drive something to it, like a pipe or get something out of it, maybe when it's dry, you could run a small plastic pipe from the spring that you could have it closer, where it would make it easier for native people to access, but you just don't advertise it. You know what I'm saying? So they wouldn't have to walk through the bog to try to get to it. Because obviously there was a reason it was there previously, and they had to get water from it somehow. I don't think they would have, because if you've ever walked in a bog, you get stuck like quicksand. I mean, so there must have been some way of getting that water from that wellhead somewhere.
Yep.
So,
Could I ask? Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead. I'm just
Just
thinking
just
of
curious about Brunswick and how people use Brunswick, and do people go there and take water? Are there any like group gatherings or ceremonies, or is it mostly individuals going and collecting and
everything.
paying respect? Yeah.
Everything. I mean, it's 100 and some odd acres. There's a pond on Brunswick Springs, that's kind of fed from the springs themselves. There's a hotel cellar hole and the bottling manufacturing plant that was there. Just the cellar hole, obviously, that's still there. So people go as groups of tribal citizens go and clean it up, or they just go there, and some people stay overnight and have a spiritual, connecting to that place. Some people come and just go where the old platform was and collect water from where it comes out of the ground, and they leave offerings of protection. So usually when you go there, you see all kinds of offerings on the bank where people have left tobacco, or they've left, you always find sometimes teenagers going there leaving sneakers or trash, but we have citizens up there that clean it up, that go there. We did have a problem with one individual destroying it and cutting trees down and really doing a number on it. So it's restricted right now. So people are kind of monitoring the place and trying to protect it from vandals. So that's worked pretty well. But it is I mean, you get the whole gamut of things, and but people go there just for the water, and some people go there just as a spiritual journey. I mean, I've known people that've had sweat lodges up there, they've had fires, they've had campovers. You know, there's even a trail that Brunswick themselves, the town, clears so you can walk all the way around the property and around the pond. So it's kind of a destination point. People come from Maine and Canada and everywhere, even New Hampshire. They come up to the springs to get water. So
The other plan we have for it is you can paddle, kayak or canoe. There's a swamp water kind of pond below it, right off the road, the main road, dirt road, and you can paddle right on up through it on that little brook. So that's an idea, is that we could have a pipe coming out with the water coming, but we don't advertise that to the public, but our people would know, and then they could get water that way, paddling.
it's just a thought. It could be a phase 2 or 3. I'm just thinking, if it is that, if it's sacred in the water, that's only if it comes back to be good water. I mean, we obviously don't want to poison our people or have something, because like I said, we don't know what natural minerals are there, but we also don't know what PFOAs or other contaminants have gotten in there from human existence that could tainted the water and make it not drinkable. So once the lab work is done, we may have a better idea to understand not only the makeup of the water, but also what pollutants might be there that are not natural.
Yeah. The likelihood of pollutants is low. It's not developed. It's not, and maybe, I don't know, is Tucked Away Farm a half a mile or is it further? 2 miles? John's place? Okay, so Bill, I'm exaggerating. It's 2 miles away is that house the woman was hiding out in. It's really isolated. It wouldn't have PFOs in it. I don't believe. The acid rain, brings some stuff.
Yeah, but you have that anywhere. I was thinking more of, contaminants that go into the watershed from various places. And
The biggest threat would be agricultural, maybe getting into the streams, but yeah, I doubt we'll find that.
okay, that's why I asked about go ahead. Sorry, Daryl.
Isn't it off East Washington Road, Sharon?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's more than just road.
Yeah. Epstein's girlfriend found it to be the most secure place for her to hide in the world. She could afford anywhere, and she bought there and hid there successfully for 2 years. Yeah.
But
The CIA and FBI looking for her.
oh, geez. But that's why I even said, like if the pipes that were used to get water out of the well were lead based, I mean, we don't know.
Right. Yep. Yeah, well, the testing will be very good, I think. And just that it's sat there and not been touched for so many years, since 1920.
I was going to say, if I wanted to joke around and be a little funny, I would love to get a chainsaw carver and do a big hairy man and stick him out there where somebody might be able to see him, put him right next to a tree.
Well, if we put the statue up on a big stump.
Yeah.
But I mean, buried out there in the swamp where people can kind of see it from the observation tower, that'd be kind of awesome. But
Well,
anyway,
that's what we're going to do with that chainsaw carving. That's our is to put him out in the swamp beside the mill. I mean, the well. Mhm.
I mean, we shouldn't play around with sacred areas, because then we might get in trouble. But I hope they have senses of humor. There is, but. So when are we looking at all this stuff taking place? Do we know, I mean, is this like just hypothetical stuff, or is things pretty rolling along and something's gonna happen?
So right now, what we're waiting on is the Osborne Trust is checking what it's going to entail to add us to the easement, conservation easement. And the ladies have you have a 7-week course, is that correct?
Yeah, we kind of wrap up the first week of December, but we have until then to work on whatever drawings, maps, just kind of responding to as the project moves along what's needed. But
So my plan was about the first week of December to ask the selectmen if we can attend the meeting, get on the agenda for the selectmen's meeting and just give them an update, offer them an update on where we're at and what our plans are, and just kind of get some feedback from them and make sure they're still all on board, which I think they will be. We did learn today that I think I probably didn't copy Dawn on it, or Brian, but Ann did some checking for the regs on building in the swamp, and it looks like we're gonna have to get a permit that would be a $400 permit. But she said she thought they could help us with that, so that was good. And I think
Is that the well? Is that the wellhead or?
no, for the walkway and the observation deck, which is going to go into the swamp.
Yeah, but you said something about there's a lead. Or did I hear that wrong?
Yeah, I don't know what I said. It wasn't.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah, so they'll, what Anne has talked about is, I think, building it on pontoons so that as the water goes up and down, it floats. And so we'll see. That's what we've talked about.
If you want, sure, yeah. When I used to be involved with the Boy Scout troop here in town, we had 2 Eagle Scout projects, and they were both in Audubon sites. And the boys, Eagle Scout project, they had to go from soup to nuts to get everything together, and they built walkways and observation decks out into these areas. One of them was way out in the woods, and the other one is right beside the road on 202. But I can find out from the former Scoutmaster what they had to go through as far as permits.
Okay.
I
I sent you the email, Daryl. You can see it.
I saw it.
Yeah.
I saw the email. I was thinking of Brad Watson. He's
Yeah.
still in the area.
It would be helpful, and maybe any tips they have, because the other thing that Polly and Ponchin have talked about is materials. What kind of materials would be important? And I did talk to them a little briefly about the double curve design. It would be nice if we could incorporate that somehow. And birch bark is another really important material for us. Bill was thinking that the material for the boardwalk, it would be good if it was cedar or tamarack.
Does your project have to be conceptualized, designed, and completed by December 1st?
No. The design completed.
One shaking her head yes, the other one shaking. So you just need to be able to design something and have us accept it so that your requirements for your course are complete. Is that correct?
I mean, I think that although we're kind of constrained to the timeline of the semester, the fact that we're, working with you outside of just our little bubble of school, we realize that that's not the timeline that the project is on. And so there won't necessarily be a full stop, but we will have to go on to other classes. But that's not to say that we'll just completely stop being involved with that.
I think Daryl's question was, did you have to have us complete a build by December?
So
No.
that you get credit for the project is what I'm getting.
No.
I was going to say, You might
Yeah,
not-
it'll be hard to build a boardwalk or a pavilion in December in New Hampshire, I'm sure.
Sherry, one recommendation that I would give to you too is that check in with the local Army Corps of Engineers, because sometimes they have floating platforms or other things that they don't use anymore or could donate that you could use as a base, or they might even be able to help with it because they deal with these kind of sensitive projects all the time, and they might be able to donate their time because when they're not training, they're always looking for things sometimes to do a quick little project. Sometimes they do on the weekends or over a couple of weekends that they could get their people together to do something. They may or may not do it, but we've had some success with that in the before, or the Forest Service or whoever that might be able to help maintain some of that.
The Corps of Engineers is a great suggestion because they have the Everett Dam. Daryl, it's called Everett Dam in Hopkinton, right?
The Hopkinton Everett Dam, yeah.
It cuts right through the middle of a village site. So that's on Daryl's list of things to do, right, Daryl? Is go talk to them.
For sure, just pile it right on. Just,
You didn't know what you were getting into, did you, Daryl, when you joined, right?
His idea, he started it. We talked about that at an early Zoom meeting, though, I think, right? You were going to go in and see if they had any records and from when they put the dam in. And so that would be a good question you could throw at them, too, about the pontoons and floating decks and the bog. And
I stopped in and went to the door because I was in my official truck. And I got asked to call on the phone. Don't come to the office. I'm like, okay, you're all here though. Why can't I just ask you the question? So I don't know if they thought I had an official DOT question to ask them or whatever. Because they don't like dealing with us. So I shouldn't have gone there with my own truck. But I was driving by.
Hey, Sherry.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. Is there any problem, like you keep mentioning cellar holes where we're looking at doing stuff? Is there any deep holes or liability that could be filled in but still made it prettier? That so you'd still see the foundation, but yet you wouldn't fall in and break your neck? I'm just thinking once we're added to the easement, I'm always thinking of liability issues. So I just want to make sure that
there's no liability in New Hampshire on that. Number one, we're protected. But number two, the foundations are in, they're very, very old and they're in various states of disrepair. So it's not like you have a square foundation and a deep hole. You can see the stone walls. Most of them are kind of two-sided, Polly, wouldn't you say? You were looking at them with me.
Yeah, and one of them is quite small too.
Yeah. Which is supposedly the barn.
Right, for very small animals.
One
okay.
goat.
I just didn't know what kind of scrap are there, like nails and other things that, just that if it's old and it's like an old stone foundation that's fallen, it's
Yeah.
probably not that big of a deal.
Nope.
I was just asking because I don't know when these things were. I mean, I know you sent me information about when it was built, but
That's all right. It was 1840 and it was torn down in 1920 and has sat empty since then. So it's, and probably people stole a lot of those stones out that are missing. But anyway,
man, I'd hate to live around there. Geez, they steal everything. Jesus.
I got to tell you, as kids growing up, both Bill and I have memories. So right across the street where this Ann Elbridge lives now, there was an old house there, and my mother and her best friend it was empty. It had always been empty. So there had been some farms along that road back in the day, and then it became totally isolated and empty. And so my mother and her friend would go up and just dig up flowers every summer to put in their gardens. It was just, and then Bill's mother went to another farm down the road to do it. So, I've said, I have to confess, I stole flowers out of your garden before you owned it.
They're the reasons we can't have nice things.
Yeah.
So,
And then another time Bill and I were up there. I didn't even know it was Bradford Springs, but we pulled over and there were apple trees there. We were looking for Bradford Bog, and there were some apple trees there, and the apples were falling off and the trees were loaded. And I picked a bunch of the apples and brought them home and made jam. So I think a lot of the kind of things that happen there are that sort of a phenomena where it's just been a known thing in this area that was an isolated, like forfeited area where things were kind of there for the taking. And I honestly do think as we develop it and start using it, I mean, the story has already gotten pretty big of Abenaki trails and locally. And I just think that people are going to be more and more conscious and respectful, but we'll see.
Well, some of the reason why I'm asking is because in all of our places, like when you talk to people about different locations in different towns, including this one, I think if we can incorporate natural materials, say nut trees, things that could be harvested, by our people, that's built into the designs that kind of go in with that place. It's a renewable resource and people may not even think about it, but for us it's important. Like on our tribal land, we're putting in apple trees, we're putting in nut trees, like if we can get butternuts or if we can put walnuts or something. I mean, they're going to be a renewable resource that people can grab if they want. So I didn't know if part of these designs, if you throw a couple of those in, if we have the money, and maybe sometimes even the local gardener supplies or places will donate a tree at the end of the year that they can't sell and they just want to get rid of it, that there might be, if you can build it into the design, there might be renewable resources for our people that could strategically be put around the property that could be utilized as it grows. I mean, it's just a thought, and that's the same thing with the other towns that are doing some properties. If they locate those areas that could be used for food purposes, it's just in natural food. One, it brings more life to it, but two, most people aren't going out there and picking stuff, and if they do, great, it'll help them.
Right.
So.
The apple trees are still there. There's 4 of them. They were damaged very seriously by our New Hampshire DOT. Got some new toys they think are really freaking cool. Right, Daryl? And they're these nasty machines. They drive down the road and it just chomps the trees. It's horrible.
That wasn't the state DOT. That was the town doing that because my boss used to mow with the over-the-rail mowers and stuff. And I talked about the East Washington Road. He goes, I mowed that so many times. I'm like, okay.
So anyway, somebody came by, and in fact, I mentioned, DOT. I'm going to tell Daryl again about this, but we pointed out it's not a state road. So anyway, whoever did it, and they about killed the trees. So they're still alive, but they're sad. You can bring Tom Wilkins up. He's an arborist.
I was just going to say, could Tom bring him back to life?
We're going to bring him up and have him give us an assessment on what it will take to rescue them.
So I guess my last question, what else do you need from me? Or I know you guys discussed a bunch of stuff before I hopped on, but
Not really.
do you have, I didn't know if you had what you needed, how.
Yeah,
for the
Polly and
conversation.
Kanchan, how are we doing? Do you need any other information?
No, this has been great. I mean, I'll share, we have a couple, I guess, I don't know, these questions are kind of general. Can you see them?
Yeah.
And don't necessarily all need to get totally addressed or answered right now. But I think, like this question of, are there things you would hope to kind of inform the design, like the actual forms of the pavilion or, and I think we talked a bit about like going up to the springs and what that could look like potentially. And then in talking about the cellar holes, I think a question we have is like, how you all feel about wanting to address the layers of colonial and Native history, and like, I don't know if you've had thoughts about that. And then we talked a bit already about ceremonies and different uses. So I think that's clear, but if you have anything to add to that, this is kind of what stands out to us. And I guess
Let me
just one more would be just generally like the attitude of respect that you hope to see for designing in a place that is a sacred place of healing. And if there's anything you'd like to tell us or, make sure that we understand in terms of that.
Let me just really quickly address the layers of indigenous and colonial settler history. So when we went there with the Osborne Trust and with Anne, what we talked about was when you first arrive at the road and there's the apple trees and the cellar holes, that we kind of address it in a way that the colonial history gets talked about in that area up front. And then you walk out back, and as you get to the swamp, I love swamps. That's not a negative thing for me. I have a lot of swamps in my house. When you get to the swamp and where the boardwalk and the observation deck would be, that's where we're really going to dive into the native history, which will also lend itself to advocating that we remove that wellhead and really return that to the native look. So I'm supposed to be talking to the Historical Society about that whole aspect and coordinating with them, which I haven't done yet, but that's kind of what we talked about. And I guess I'd like to hear Dawn's and Brian's and people's thoughts on that, Daryl's.
Well, I have two things. One, I think I agree with Brian and other people that, I mean, we should return it back to the state that it was from a native perspective. If we can remove, that wellhead or whatever and all the pipes and all that, as long as we can get to the spring or create a way to get the water. When it comes to like a pavilion, I would there are depends upon the money that we have, but I've seen some pretty cool composite roofing materials that look like bark that's used as shingles. So you could almost do it in the shape of a longhouse, but leave the sides open. Or you could kind of cover the roof with a composite bark material, or if you were going to use natural material like a cedar shingle or something that's going to last. Because obviously, once this is built, it's got to be maintained and it's got to, so resources could be slim. I mean, whatever way that people want to build the pavilion, and if it's maybe closer to the native piece and not so much close to the European, I think it's almost like a travel back in time, right? You're going from European back towards native things where the swamp is more important. And that's where people would be to observe wildlife or anything else they are anyway. And they might want to have lunch next to the boardwalk or next to the, I don't know, but I see it being designed with native features in mind, whether it be with some sort of cedar post or bark post, or not real bark because that'll destroy real quick. But I mean like, some kind of composite or something that would be similar. Does that sound right? Or
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think the pavilion's going to need to be up in the colonial area because it's
okay.
where it will fit. But and in terms of the materials, I'm biblically familiar with someone who owns a sawmill, so Bill can saw out all the lumber that we need. And I had hoped we could use the cedar, the Atlantic cedar, white cedar, but I guess we can't even cut any of that. So, but Anne said across the street, she has a few on her land, so it's possible we can get some cedar from her place and use that a little bit in it. But anyway, so I think it would be a timber frame design.
Okay.
With the cedar shakes on the roof. We'll go with the native type materials, and then that way it doesn't need a lot of upkeep. Bill and I built one about 10 years ago, and it still looks as good as it did when we built it.
Okay, perfect. All right, I didn't know where it was going to be, so that's why I was just.
No, but I really love what you're saying. I mean, it would be great I wonder if even the observation deck, ladies, if we could have that almost like a longhouse design.
That's what I was just gonna ask, yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
So yeah, it's a good idea. And I like your concept that you already had in terms of from a historical standpoint, with you really don't have a choice because the colonial section is in the front, but it kind of bodes well that, colonial history is always like there and in your face. Like, so it's the first thing you hit when you get there. And then walking back, and then are we going to have signage? That was my next question in terms of like, maybe just identification, like this is white cedar, this is, that kind of thing, because that'll be great. Personally, I'd like to see it in both English and Abenaki. If we could have both on the sign, again, kind of make sure it's in the faces of people there that this is Abenaki land. And of course, bogs, I know you said you love bogs, but bogs and swamps are where you find most medicines.
Right.
That's where you're going to find most of what you're looking for.
So Marty Mitchner is a botanist. He's a PhD, teaches at Harvard, blah, blah, blah. And he's a good friend of ours. And I spoke to him and he's more than happy to walk it with us and point out different plants, bring them to our attention. And I love your idea of both languages on the signs for sure. Yeah.
Yep. Also, too, if you want to satisfy Bill's need, when they have the observation area and it's going to be sort of like an octagon sort of type thing, you could actually build a wigwam, like a rounded wigwam sort of structure where the door of the wigwam would be the entrance to that observation deck, and then you would have areas that you could see out of. But the inside you could decorate almost as if you would have a wigwam, because I mean you could have benches that sit there that would mimic a bed, that you would have, or you could, I don't know, you could probably do some pretty creative things that would be kind of cool, that as you walk out into the field, you see this kind of wigwam kind of shape that you could walk in to not only observe things, but inside of that structure you could have not only information like Brian was saying with signs about different things, but you could also maybe even have things that would hang from the rafter if it was roofed, that you could hang that, like have a smoke hole in the top where, or whatever. Not that it would be used for that, but I mean, you could mimic something
Right.
that would kind of look cool, especially if you could bend the trees over, like use a actual, like you would, using that natural material to bend over almost like you would whether it be a wigwam or a longhouse, and then cover it. So that might be kind of a cool thing. I know we're kind of, it's kind of a pipe dream, but that would be kind of a cool.
I don't think that's that far out of the realm. I think that's definitely in the realm. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like something that we talked about a little bit is that, we can make drawings and plans of these ideas, and you can use them also for finding funding, and applying for grants. So definitely like keep that in mind, that, like to like let the imagination go and dream, and that, to an extent, like we can visualize that stuff to help find the funding.
Because I mean, I've been down towards the Mohegan Sun and down towards the Massachusetts area. They have there's like a little museum. They have like 3 wigwams that are in one of their little museums that's close to one of the casinos that you can go in. And then they have like gardens that are next to it. Like this is sage, this is sweetgrass. And then you walk in and you could see like how it would have been set up. And I think periodically when they do stories, they use those. But I mean, it's actually, it's like an outdoor gazebo, but it's shaped like a rounded wigwam that would mimic what we had, and you could look out the windows and stuff like that. Not the windows, but the openings. You could kind of look out. So because that's what provided light. I think that might be a kind of a cool idea.
Yeah, and I think that the Indian Museum, Chris Bullock, he loves doing the cat and nine tail mats. So lining the walls with the cat and nine tail mats and that kind of stuff. And the Indian Museum today volunteered they're putting up money. They and Wandering Bull are both chipping in money to help fund the regalia that we're going to donate to the Indian Museum. And then they're going to do classes on center seam, brain tan moccasins. And so anyway, they're partnering up with us really nicely. So I think Chris would love this. And Chris lives in Washington, which is the Bradford Springs is almost on the border of Washington. So that's where Wandering Bull is now. And
He lives on Level Mountain.
yeah.
It's
So
not far away from there.
no, not at all. So Chris would love to help us with the wigwam idea out there too. Yeah. Bill thinks the wigwam should go over the spring.
I think,
There you go.
I think
Whatever. And you have Nulhegan written all over it too, right? No, just kidding.
I take the town.
Yeah.
You gotta give the town something they want. And I really think that like, we have an activation, but
Yeah.
a wigwam to go over the spring, but no way to get.
Yeah. Okay.
It all depends on really what the historical society will allow. I mean,
Right.
because if they say that wellhead's got to stay there because of history, then build something over it or something,
Right.
or conceal it somehow to make it look somewhat native.
Yeah.
If they say it could be removed, that's a different story.
Yeah.
So it probably has to wait and see what their thoughts are about it.
Yeah.
I feel like a pretty compelling argument there, though, could be that if it feels important to some people, the historical nature of it, I mean, it could definitely be removed and then kept as a sort of, reconstructed elsewhere off the property. I don't know if any of the local historical societies have room, but I mean, it doesn't have to live there, but it could still live on. So that might be a way to kind of.
And I think our bylaws supersede theirs anyway.
The well has been reconstructed inside the well house up at Musterfield Farm, the next town up. So there already is a replica of it that exists on another museum. Yeah. All right. Well,
Great. Yeah, I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. And, I don't know if there are any last comments or thoughts.
My only last comment is I want to thank you for putting in your time and for helping in this project. And like I said, I'm kind of I'm the chief, obviously, but I'm far removed. But I'm trying to support all of our citizens, no matter where they live, whether it be New Hampshire, whether it be Massachusetts or Rhode Island or wherever. So I appreciate you taking the time to bring me up to speed, so I know what's going on in our territories. But I really want to thank you for working with us to create something special. But and I also really want to thank Sherry and Daryl and Brian for their consistent work on this, because without them we wouldn't have these trail projects through New Hampshire, and I think it's very important for our visibility and for Native people in general. So it doesn't always have to be a protest. It doesn't always have to be something, it can be uplifting and good. And we look at these trail projects as something uplifting, good, while educating people at the same time. So we don't see any downside to this. It's always something positive. So thank you for being part of that.
We really appreciate being part of it as well. And you've already all taken time to just bring us up to speed. And I feel like we've learned so much. And definitely will have the communication channels open if there are any other thoughts or ideas just in the coming weeks. Then we will be accessible, and hopefully we'll get to come up again at some point too to see the sites with a little bit fewer leaves on the trees.
Yeah, I think on a larger note too is that since you do work for Harvard, or you're part of Harvard, that the schools really should start thinking about educational opportunities. I know Jesse Bruchak has been there and done a few things, but I mean, I really think that the colleges, I work with three colleges, moving to 4 now, on different programs: education, food sovereignty, how that we can support their students, how, because it's part of the education, right? It's part of cultural, social justice and cultural education. So I would really challenge your school to not only you doing this, which is awesome, but let them know, because a lot of times they're so desegregated. Every department runs themselves, but to really get the school and other people active into doing this and making this a routine thing instead of a one-off. I'm just challenging
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
as people. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for saying that. Yeah, totally agree.
Thank you, everyone. This was wonderful. And thank you, Daryl, for doing the Zoom.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah.
As soon as it becomes available, the recording, I'll make sure I get it onto the YouTube page. So you can go back and look at all our words of wisdom for tonight.
hey, on a side note, I'm eating moose sausage tonight. So if you guys are gonna, I've offered that if you guys want any moose or anything from our food sovereignty programs, kind of let me know. I'll keep some aside, but somebody has to make a road trip.
I was gonna say, are you gonna freeze dry it and pack it up for me? Ship it down?
Well, it's frozen in my freezer right now. I had to buy another freezer so I could put it in. And if that buffalo thing deal comes through, I might have a couple of those too, but we'll see.
All right, so
Um,
I'll email you my choice, and Madeline, when she comes up for council, can bring it
I was
back.
just gonna say,
That's fine with me. I'm okay with that as long as she has a cooler with some ice.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're doing logistical things now that we're but anyway, I'm being serious. I want to share the wealth. So
Thank you.
I have bear too. I might have some bear if anything. Anyway, thank you guys.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye,
Yeah,
everyone. Have a great night.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you so much.
thank you.
see ya, bye-bye.